Morning light spread over Georgia like smoke. On Whitmore Plantation, roses glistened with dew, red as blood. Mrs. Whitmore stepped out in her blue dress, her white gloves shining against the heat. Down by the garden, two small boys played in the dirt, laughing while their mother scrubbed a copper pot nearby. Then came the sound of wagon wheels and slow, heavy, unfamiliar. A rose merchant, bundles wrapped in burlap. Tags from Charleston, $40, he said. The lady's smile faded. Her eyes drifted toward the children. She didn't reach for her purse. She lifted her fan and pointed. Those two, the mother froze. Her heart turned to stone. The boys kept laughing. By noon, papers were signed. The roses were planted. The children were gone. The mother fell to her knees in the red clay as the wagon disappeared down the road. The lady filled her vase with fresh roses and hummed softly, proud of her garden. But beneath those roses, a different seed had taken root, one fed by grief, watered by vengeance, and destined to bloom in fire. If you believe some stories must never be forgotten, subscribe and comment your state below. Tell me, when love is sold, what should justice cost? The Whitmore Plantation sat on a rise above the river, its white columns glowing like bones in the morning sun. Magnolia trees lined the drive, and their scent mixed with the sweet rot of damp earth. To visitors, it looked like paradise, but to the people who worked its fields and kitchens, it was a cage built from beauty and pain. Mrs. Whitmore loved things that bloomed, roses, pearls, and lies. She ordered her flowers from Charleston, her tea from London, and her silks from New York. Everything about her world had to shine, even the people she owned. She believed control was grace and obedience was beauty. Sarah had learned that truth the hard way. 15 years of quiet labor had taught her how to move like a shadow, speak only when spoken to, and hide her tears in the laundry steam. She had come to this place as a child and built her life around her two sons, Samuel and Thomas. They were her light in a world made of chains. Every morning she watched them play behind the kitchen garden, two bright souls in a place that tried to crush every spark. Samuel, 8, had eyes too old for his face. Thomas, 6, still carried laughter in his voice. Sarah taught them secretly at night, tracing letters in the dirt with a stick while the others slept. These letters, she whispered, are keys. One day they'll open doors no chains can hold shut. Inside the big house, Mrs. Whitmore practiced the piano and planned her next order of imported bulbs. Her husband's gambling debts grew, but her vanity grew faster. She spoke often of roses, the rare climbing kinds from Savannah, the pink tea blossoms seen in the governor's garden. A lady's worth, she told her friends, is measured by how her roses bloom. Sarah knew what that meant. When a white woman in a silk dress wanted something, someone else always paid the price. She just didn't know that this time, the price would be her children. The morning the rose merchant came, the plantation air was still and heavy, the kind of heat that made the world feel too quiet before a storm. Sarah saw Mrs. Whitmore smile at the man's wagon, the same bright, false smile she used on everyone she wanted to own. By the time the sun reached its peak, the deal was made. 2 roses for 2 boys, beauty for blood. And while Mrs. Whitmore arranged her flowers in a crystal vase, Sarah's world turned to ash. 32, Georgia. 1 plantation, 2 stolen sons. When mother's silence begins to burn, would you have bowed your head or sworn revenge? The day after her children were taken, the sky broke open. Rain fell hard, soaking the red clay until it bled into puddles around Sarah's bare feet. She worked in the storm, digging holes for the new rose bushes, her hands blistered and raw. Each plant came wrapped in burlap, labeled with names that sounded elegant and cruel. Queen's Pride, Savannah Belle, Blood of Summer. Mrs. Whitmore watched from the porch under a parasol. "Be careful with those roots," she said, her voice sharp and clean over the rain. "They're delicate, delicate." The word twisted in Sarah's chest. Her boys had been delicate once too. Soft hands, soft laughter, soft dreams. She had protected them from the whip, from the hunger, from the cold. But she could not protect them from her mistress's greed. Every thrust of the shovel felt like digging her own grave. The rain mixed with her tears until she could no longer tell one from the other. She whispered her sons' names with every root she buried. Samuel, Thomas, like a prayer or a curse. When the last rose was in the ground, The garden glowed red against the gray sky. Mrs. Whitmore smiled, pleased. "They'll bloom beautifully," she said, stepping closer to admire her work. "The soil here is rich." Sarah bit her tongue until she tasted blood. She wanted to scream that the soil was rich because it was fed with stolen lives, watered with a mother's tears. But she stayed silent, not out of fear, but because silence could hide what words might reveal too soon. That night in the quarters, Sarah lay awake on her straw pallet, staring into darkness. The others whispered prayers for her, for the lost boys, for mercy. But mercy was a language she no longer understood. She thought of her sons, Samuel's sharp mind, Thomas's dimpled grin. Were they safe? Were they crying? Did they still believe their mama would come for them? A soft wind passed through the open window, carrying the scent of roses. It made her stomach twist. She sat up, her hands shaking. "No," she whispered. "Not peace. Not beauty. Not while they live and my babies are gone." In that moment, Sarah's grief hardened into something else. Colder, steadier, sharper. She understood that pain could wither you or make you bloom in ways the world didn't expect. The next morning, Mrs. Whitmore's garden was the pride of the county. But behind every blossom was a mother's promise that one day, those roses would drink something more than rain. And when the sun set over the fields, the roses looked redder than before. 1852, Georgia. 2 roses bloom. 2 children gone. 1 mother learns the taste of fire. Would you have buried your sorrow, or let it grow into vengeance? Weeks passed like slow poison. The roses bloomed taller each day, their red petals open like small wounds across the garden. Mrs. Whitmore walked among them every morning, humming softly, proud of her perfect world. She never noticed the way Sarah's eyes followed her, not with fear anymore, but with a cold patience that no whip could break. Sarah moved like smoke through the house. She scrubbed the floors, pressed linen, poured tea. Her silence made her invisible, and invisible people could listen. She began to collect whispers, pieces of information that slipped from careless mouths. Mrs. Whitmore's husband, drunk from his gambling nights, spoke of debts. The overseer muttered about missing silver. The merchant in town grumbled that the Whitmores owed him money for fine china. Sarah memorized every word, every weakness. In the evenings, she hid beneath the house where the wooden beams smelled of dust and mold. Rats scurried nearby, and her candle flickered as she pulled out scraps of old paper she had saved from the kitchen trash. Using a bit of charcoal, she drew a map. Lines for roads, dots for towns, arrows where she had overheard the merchants say they traded. Somewhere on that path, she told herself, her sons were alive. But revenge was not just about finding them. It was about balance. The kind that required patience and fire. One night, while emptying the chamber pots, Sarah discovered where Mrs. Whitmore kept her jewelry, a small wooden box hidden behind perfume bottles with a false bottom. Inside lay pearls, rings, and a brooch shaped like a rose. Sarah smiled faintly. Even her greed carried the same symbol that had stolen her children. She closed the box carefully and whispered, "One day." The other servants noticed the change in her. Big Martha said Sarah's eyes had gone quiet, the way a snake goes still before it strikes. Cook said the roses near the kitchen door grew taller where Sarah passed, as if they recognized the fury in her blood. At night, Sarah stopped praying for peace. She began to pray for signs. A door left unlocked, carriage wheel broken, a letter misplaced. Her chance came one afternoon when Mrs. Whitmore's sister visited from Charleston. As the 2 women talked in the parlor, Sarah stood by the door, pouring tea. Her eyes lowered, but her ears sharp. "I can't keep up appearances," Mrs. Whitmore said in a low voice. "The creditors are circling. My husband's lost everything," her sister sighed. "Then you must sell something of value." Mrs. Whitmore's eyes drifted toward the window, where the roses blazed in the sunlight. "I already did," she murmured. "And still the bills keep coming." Sarah's hand trembled. That was her proof. Her children were payment, and yet even their lives couldn't buy enough peace for the lady who sold them. She set the teapot down slowly, steadying her breath. It was time to make the debt run both ways. 52, Georgia. Roses bloom above buried secrets, and a mother begins to dig. Would you forgive or make the soil remember blood? By midsummer, the Whitmore roses were famous across the county. Visitors rode miles just to see them bloom. They gasped at their size and color, the deep red petals, the sweet perfume that hung in the air. Mrs. Whitmore would smile proudly, offering lemonade on her porch as she spoke about imported soil, careful pruning, and God's blessing. But Sarah knew what really fed those roots, and grief, sweat, and the memory of two small boys whose laughter had once filled that same yard. Every morning before sunrise, she knelt in the garden to trim the roses. To anyone watching, she looked obedient, humble, quiet, but every cut she made was measured. Every thorn she left untrimmed had purpose. She worked the earth with the same care she had once given to her children, and she whispered to it. "You took them," she murmured, digging deep with the small trowel. "Now take her." Inside the big house, Mrs. Whitmore's headaches grew worse. Her husband stayed away for days, chasing cards and whiskey. The plantation books didn't balance anymore. She began locking her doors at night, as if she sensed something creeping closer. Sarah noticed everything, where the keys were kept, which windows didn't latch, which servants went to bed early, and which ones might keep quiet if she ever disappeared. She started saving. Spoonful of sugar here, a bit of flour there. A few copper coins she found, dropped behind the pantry shelf. Small things no one would notice. She wrapped them in cloth and hid them under the tool shed behind the garden, the same place where her sons once played with sticks and stones. Sometimes she sat there after dark, listening to the night insects sing and imagining Samuel and Thomas's laughter mixing with the crickets. Those memories no longer broke her. They sharpened her. Old Moses, the wagon driver, saw the fire in her eyes one evening. "Child," he said softly, "don't let hate eat you. Fire burns what it touches, even the one who lights it." Sarah looked at him and replied, "Then I'll burn carefully." That night, she tested the locks on the pantry door. She watched how the moonlight hit the side of the big house at midnight, where the shadows fell, where footsteps wouldn't echo. Every detail mattered. Revenge, she decided, was like tending roses. It needed patience, care, and perfect timing. When the new shipment of roses arrived from Charleston, Mrs. Whitmore told Sarah to prepare the garden again. The merchant spoke of droughts and dying farms along the road south. In his talk, Sarah caught a detail, a plantation near the Savannah River called Riverside, one that bought child servants that same season. Her breath caught. That was where her Samuel had gone. The plan shifted that very night. Revenge would come, but not before rescue. 52 Georgia. Roses bloom, money dries, and a mother starts to move. If you were her, would you run first or make them pay first? The August air was thick as syrup. Even the frogs had stopped singing. Inside the quarters, everyone slept under the weight of heat and exhaustion. But Sarah lay awake, staring at the wooden ceiling, her heart beating slow and steady, like a drum before battle. Tonight was the night. She rose quietly, her bare feet making no sound on the dirt floor. In the corner, her small bundle waited, scraps of food, a tin of water, a coil of rope, and the kitchen knife she had sharpened for weeks until it could cut through rope, or flesh. Outside, the roses shone faintly under the moonlight. Their petals glowed red, their thorns glistening with dew. Sarah walked between them as if walking through graves. "You've taken enough from me," she whispered. "Now I'll take back what's mine." She entered the big house through the kitchen door. She knew every creak, every loose board, every shadow. The house had never feared her before, but tonight it seemed to hold its breath. Upstairs, Mrs. Whitmore slept soundly, a bottle of laudanum half empty on her nightstand. Her face looked peaceful in the moonlight, soft as silk. It would have been easy to end her then. A pillow, a knife, one quick motion. But Sarah didn't want her dead yet. Death was mercy. Mrs. Whitmore needed to live long enough to understand what loss felt like. Instead, Sarah crossed to the vanity and found the wooden jewelry box. She opened it with the small key she had stolen days earlier. Inside glittered the lady's treasures, pearls, gold, a brooch shaped like a rose. The same rose that had taken her boys. Sarah's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of justice. She took it all, leaving the box empty except for a folded piece of paper. In shaky letters she had written, "You bought roses with my sons. Now I buy freedom with your jewels. The soil remembers." She placed the note on the pillow beside the sleeping woman's head, close enough that she'd see it first thing in the morning. Then Sarah turned and slipped back into the night. Outside, thunder rolled far away. Soft, distant, promising rain. She went to the shed behind the kitchen and dug up her hidden bundle. From inside, she pulled the stolen jewelry and tied it tight in a cloth. The roses swayed in the wind, brushing her arms as if in warning, but she didn't look back. When the first drop of rain touched her cheek, she whispered to the night, "I'm coming, Samuel." "Mama's coming." The storm gathered behind her as she disappeared into the woods. Lightning lit the sky, white and fierce, and for a heartbeat the plantation looked like it was already on fire. 52 Georgia. One night, one mother vanishes, and revenge begins its walk north. Would you have spared her, or struck while she slept? The woods swallowed her whole, branches closed above like cathedral arches, the air damp and humming with insects. Every sound felt too loud. A snapped twig, a rustling leaf, her own heartbeat thudding like a drum in her ears. Sarah walked barefoot for the first few miles, afraid shoes might betray her with noise. The ground was rough, the pine needles sharp, but pain no longer frightened her. It reminded her she was still alive. Behind her, the Whitmore house slept unaware. But dawn would come, and when Mrs. Whitmore found her jewels gone and her note beside the empty box, the hunt would begin. Sarah had until sunrise to vanish. She followed the creek that wound north through the pines. The moonlight shimmered on the water, guiding her like a silver thread. She remembered old Moses' stories, of hidden trails and safe crossings, of Quakers and free blacks who helped the desperate find their way north. Maybe those stories were true, maybe not, but she clung to them anyway. By the second night, hunger clawed at her stomach. She chewed on wild berries and drank from muddy streams. Her feet bled, but she wrapped them in scraps of her skirt and kept walking. She whispered her sons' names with every step. Samuel for the left foot, Thomas for the right. "One more mile, my babies. Mama's coming." Rain came hard on the third night. She found shelter in a hollow log, clutching her bundle of stolen jewelry close to her chest. Lightning flashed through the trees, white and wild, turning every shadow into a ghost. In that storm, she remembered her boys' laughter, and for the first time since their sale, she smiled. "You're still with me," she murmured. "Always." When the rain stopped, she met a woman on the trail, tall, strong, wrapped in a dark shawl. Her name was Ruth, a free black woman moving silently through the woods with a lantern hooded against the light. "You running to something or from something?" Ruth asked quietly. "Both," Sarah said. Ruth studied her, eyes soft but sharp. "Then you're on the right road. Keep north till the river bends twice. There's a man there who helps our kind. Name's Hayes. Tell him Ruth sent you." Sarah wanted to thank her, but Ruth was already gone, melted into the forest like smoke. That night, Sarah slept for the first time in days, beneath a canopy of stars that looked like watchful eyes. The North Star burned brighter than the rest, and she followed it in her dreams, toward her son, toward her vengeance, toward the edge of freedom. 52 Georgia. The forest whispers. A mother walks north, carrying fury and faith. Would you risk capture for a child, or leave vengeance to God? By the time Sarah reached the Hayes farm, her feet were torn, her clothes soaked with mud, and her voice nearly gone. The farmhouse sat low among rolling fields of corn, a lantern glowing in the window like a promise. She hesitated at the gate, clutching her bundle of stolen jewels. When the door opened, a thin man with kind eyes stepped out. "You must be the woman Ruth spoke of," he said softly. "Come in quick before the dogs start barking." Inside, the air smelled of bread and wood smoke. Hayes's wife brought her water and a wool blanket, saying little. Sarah ate slowly, each bite trembling in her hands. When the man finally sat across from her, he didn't ask for her name. He just said, "Tell me who they took." "My sons," she whispered. "They sold my boys for flowers." Something flickered in his face. Sorrow, disbelief, and then quiet resolve. "You came from Whitmore Plantation?" She nodded, he sighed. "I've heard of them. Cruel people hiding behind fine manners. You're lucky to have made it out alive." "I ain't lucky," Sarah said, her voice steady now. "I'm just not done." Hayes leaned forward. There's a plantation north of here by the Savannah River, Riverside. They bought a boy last spring, 8 years old, bright, good with his hands. Sounds like your eldest, Sarah's breath caught. Samuel, he nodded. The owner, Crawford, owes me money for grain. He trusts me. If I go there, I can offer to buy the boy, as if he were for my own household. I'll say I need a servant. He won't question it. Sarah untied her bundle and pushed it across the table. Pearls, gold rings. The sapphire brooch glimmered in the lamplight. Use these. They're hers. Let her jewels buy back what she stole. Hayes's wife gasped softly, but her husband placed his hand over Sarah's. You understand. This is dangerous for all of us. If we're caught, then God will judge them before he judges me. Sarah interrupted. The man studied her face, seeing something fierce and holy in her eyes. He nodded once. Then it settled. Rest tonight. At dawn I'll ride to Riverside. That night Sarah didn't sleep. She sat by the small window, watching the lantern flicker against the rain. She thought of Samuel, her bright boy, her brave one, and imagined him in strange hands, wondering if she still lived. When morning came, Hayes saddled his horse. Stay hidden, he told her. If I bring him, it'll be before sundown. Sarah watched him ride away down the muddy road until he vanished beyond the trees. Then she knelt in the dirt and whispered, Please, Lord, let one of my children come home. The sky stayed gray all day, but for the first time the rain didn't feel like sorrow. It felt like something washing clean, 52 Georgia. A stolen son, a silent deal, and a mother waiting in the rain. If it were your child, would you trust a stranger with their freedom? The sun had barely started sinking when Sarah heard it, the soft creak of wagon wheels coming up the dirt path. Her breath caught in her throat. She ran to the window, heart pounding so hard it felt like the whole room shook. Through the fading light, she saw Hayes's horse and wagon. On the back seat sat a boy, thin, quiet, his head bowed. For a moment, she didn't move. She was afraid to believe it, afraid it was another dream that would vanish if she blinked. Then the boy lifted his face. Samuel. Her hands flew to her mouth, and a sound escaped her. A cry, half joy, half disbelief. She stumbled out the door and ran barefoot into the yard, her skirt heavy with mud. Hayes had barely stopped the wagon before she was there, pulling her son into her arms. He was taller than she remembered, thinner too, his eyes shadowed but still bright. His hands gripped her dress like he was afraid she might disappear. Mama, he whispered, his voice shaking. I told them you'd come. I told them. Sarah pressed her face against his hair and wept. I came, baby. I came. Hayes climbed down from the wagon, his face solemn but soft. He's free now, he said quietly. Papers signed. Paid in full. Sarah looked up at him through tears. God bless you, he nodded once. Don't thank me. Just don't stop running. Inside the farmhouse, Samuel ate bread and stew as if he hadn't eaten in days. Between bites, he told her what life at Riverside had been like. He slept on a pallet in the hall, served in the main house, polished silver, fetched water. The master wasn't cruel, he said, but he wasn't kind either. I just did what I was told. Sarah listened, her hand never leaving his. Every word cut her heart open, but she needed to hear it. Needed to know the shape of her child's survival. Where's Thomas? Samuel asked finally. Did you find him too? The question hit like a blade. Sarah swallowed hard. Not yet, baby. But I will. I promise you I will. Hayes's wife placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. You can't stay long. Word will spread about Crawford's sale. If Whitmore put a bounty on you, bounty hunters will be looking everywhere. Sarah nodded. She knew it was true. The world was still dangerous. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel empty. She felt alive and armed with purpose. That night, she held Samuel close as he slept, his breathing steady against her chest. The wind outside howled through the trees, but in her heart, there was only peace and the promise of more to come. Georgia. One son found, one still lost. One mother refuses to rest. Would you keep searching or learn to live with what's gone? Before dawn, Hayes hitched the horse to the wagon again. His voice was low, urgent. You've got to leave now. The word will spread by midday. Whitmore's already offered $50 for your capture. Sarah nodded, clutching Samuel's hand. We'll go north. He handed her a folded paper and a small sack of food. Follow the river until it bends twice. There's a man there, another conductor. Tell him Hayes sent you. And remember, trust no one who smiles too quick. They left before the rooster crowed. The sky was dark blue, the color of old bruises. The road wound through pine woods heavy with mist. Sarah walked behind the wagon at first, then through the trees when the sun began to rise. Samuel moved quietly beside her, his small fingers clutching the hem of her dress. By midday, they reached the river's edge. A wooden ferry waited, guided by a black man with tired eyes and steady hands. He didn't speak much, just nodded when Sarah said, "Hayes sent us." The crossing was slow. The water was dark and deep, the air filled with the sound of frogs and oars. Samuel shivered, watching ripples break against the boat. "Will they follow us, Mama?" "They might," she said softly. "But the North Star don't point backward." They camped that night in an abandoned barn. Its roof half collapsed, hay scattered like ghosts. Sarah lit a small fire from dry straw, careful to hide its glow. She shared the bread and apples Hayes's wife had packed, watching Samuel eat with quiet joy. For the first time in months, she almost smiled, but then dogs, distant, barking, getting closer. Sarah's body froze. She doused the fire, grabbed Samuel's hand, and ran into the woods. The barks echoed through the dark, followed by men's voices shouting orders. Lanterns flickered between the trees, swinging like angry stars. They ran until Samuel stumbled. Sarah pulled him up, whispering, "Quiet now, baby, quiet." She pressed her back against a tree, holding her son tight. Her own breath felt too loud, her heart beat a hammer. The dogs came near, noses low, snarling. Then thunder. Rain poured down so suddenly it was as if heaven itself took her side. The scent of wet earth drowned their trail. The dogs whined, confused, their masters cursing. Sarah looked up, the rain running down her face. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered. They waited until the sounds faded into nothing. Then she turned north again, step by step, mud sucking at her feet, her son's hand never letting go. When dawn broke, the storm was gone, and the North Star glowed faintly above the trees. Sarah pointed upward. "That's our road now, Samuel. Follow it, and it'll never lie." He looked up, eyes wide with wonder, and nodded. The world was still cruel, but somewhere ahead, freedom was waiting. 52 Georgia. A river crossed, a storm sent. A mother refuses to stop. If freedom meant losing everything, would you still chase it? By the time they reached the border of Pennsylvania, weeks had passed. Their clothes were torn, their shoes nearly gone, and their bodies thin from hunger. But Sarah's eyes still burned bright. The fire that had started in Georgia had not dimmed. It had only changed color from rage to resolve. The road north wound through thick forests and quiet towns. They traveled by night, hiding in barns, cellars, and once inside a church, where a kind preacher hid them beneath the floorboards, while soldiers passed outside. Every night Samuel asked the same question. "Are we close, Mama?" "Closer than yesterday," she'd say. "That's all that matters." The Underground Railroad was not made of iron or steam. It was made of hearts. Hands that opened doors, eyes that watched in silence, families who risked everything to pass bread to strangers. But danger still walked behind them. Posters nailed to trees offered a $50 reward. Sarah, runaway slave traveling with a boy, presumed stolen property. Her name had become a price tag. One night near Harrisburg, a man found them sleeping in a hayloft. His lantern flared, lighting her face. "You two don't belong here," he said, his voice thick with suspicion. Sarah's hand went to the knife at her belt. "We're just travelers," she said softly. He studied her, the blade's edge glinting in her eyes. Then slowly he lowered his light. "You keep heading north. My sister runs a safe house 2 miles past the river. Tell her Luke sent you." He walked away without another word. Kindness like that broke her almost as much as cruelty. She had forgotten what it felt like to be helped without cost. The final stretch was the hardest. Rain froze in the trees, turning branches to glass. Samuel's hands cracked from the cold. His breath came in shallow gasps. Sarah gave him her shawl, wrapping it tight around his shoulders. "Just a little farther, baby. We're almost there." They reached the banks of the Niagara River under a bruised gray sky. The water roared like the voice of every mother who'd ever lost a child. On the far shore was Canada, freedom waiting in silence. A ferryman met them there, his face hidden by a scarf. "Cross fast," he said. "The current's strong." Halfway across, Samuel gripped her arm. "Mama, look!" Behind them, men stood on the far bank, bounty hunters, rifles raised. Sarah turned toward them, eyes blazing. "Shoot if you dare," she shouted over the wind. "But you'll never own us again." A gun cracked and the sound lost in thunder. The ferrymen rowed harder. The boat rocked, water spilling over its edge. Then finally, the current eased. When her feet touched the cold Canadian shore, Sarah dropped to her knees and kissed the wet earth. "We're free," she whispered. "We made it, 1852, the river crossed. The price paid, freedom finally breathes. If you had to cross fire and water for your child, would you?" Toronto, Canada, winter of 1853. Snow lay over the small settlement like a white quilt. Chimneys smoked. The air smelled of wood and bread instead of sweat and lye. Sarah had never seen snow before. It frightened her at first. How quiet it made the world. She found work as a seamstress, her hands skilled from years in Mrs. Whitmore's house. Each stitch earned her coins, her first real wages. For the first time, her work belonged to her. Samuel went to school. He learned letters properly, the same letters his mother had once drawn in the dirt by candlelight. He wrote his name slowly at first, crooked lines and shaky curves, then faster, cleaner. "I can write, Mama," he said proudly. "Now I can write to Thomas." Sarah smiled, though her heart ached. "Yes, baby. Right, words can travel where we can't." Every night she lit a candle in the window. "For Thomas," she told the neighbors when they asked. "So he knows we're waiting." Years passed. The candle never went out. It burned through rain and snow, through nights when she doubted God and mornings when she believed again. Sometimes travelers knocked on her door, freed men, lost women, children searching for kin. She fed them, clothed them, listened to their stories. And every time she asked, "Have you seen a boy named Thomas?" 6 when they took him. Dimple in his left cheek. No one had, but she didn't stop asking. She couldn't. Samuel grew tall. He became a teacher, one of the first in their community. He told the children stories about his mother's courage, about roses that bloomed redder than blood, and about a promise that crossed rivers and borders. One night, as Sarah watched him teach by lamplight, she realized something. Freedom wasn't quiet. It wasn't gentle. It was loud. In laughter, in books, in children's voices, learning to speak without fear. That was the sound of revenge. Still, she dreamed of Thomas. Sometimes she saw him as a grown man, standing in a field of roses, smiling. Sometimes she saw him as a boy calling her name. When the wind howled outside her cottage, she whispered, "I'm still here, baby." Follow the light. The candle became a symbol in the town. Other families began lighting their own, for sons, daughters, and parents lost to slavery's reach. From one mother's grief, a ritual of remembrance spread. And though Sarah never found her younger son, she found something else, a peace that didn't erase the pain but gave it meaning. Freedom didn't heal her wounds. It taught her how to live with them. Feet 3 Canada. One candle, one hope. One mother still searching through time. If someone you loved was lost forever, would you still keep the light burning? By the late 1880s, the world had changed. Slavery had ended, but its ghost still walked the South, in the fields. The blood, in the stories people tried to forget. In Canada, an old woman named Sarah sat by her window, her hands folded over a worn Bible. The skin of her fingers was scarred from a lifetime of work, but steady as ever. Beside her, the same candle burned, its flame trembling but unbroken. Her son, Samuel, was now a teacher and activist. His voice had become known across the northern towns, telling the story of their escape, of his mother's strength, and of the 2 roses that had cost their family everything. When children asked if the story was true, he always answered the same way. Yes, and it still is, because some debts never die. They only change shape. Sarah died quietly one morning in 1889. Snow was falling outside her window, soft and endless. The candle beside her had burned down to its final inch, its light flickering in the breeze. When her neighbors entered, they found her smiling, one hand resting on a folded letter, written in Samuel's hand, with just 4 words, "We are still free." She was buried in Toronto's Mount Pleasant Cemetery. Her gravestone was simple, carved by Samuel himself. Sarah, mother, fighter, free. Years later, visitors to her grave planted 2 rose bushes beside it, red and white. They took root easily, their blooms glowing bright against the cold northern air. No one knew their origin, but locals whispered that the soil remembered her story, the roses she had planted in grief, now blooming in peace. Over time, her name became a quiet legend among freed families. They told their children about the woman who traded jewels for justice, who walked through fire and rain to reclaim what was hers. Some said that when the wind blew through the cemetery at night, you could smell roses, even in winter. And in Georgia, far to the south, the Whitmore plantation fell into ruin. The fields turned wild, the big house crumbled, yet the rose garden still lived. Vines crawled over broken columns and cracked marble, their roots deep in red earth. No one tended them, yet every spring they bloomed. Beautiful, defiant, and unkillable. The locals avoided that place. They said the roses grew too red, too alive, as if they remembered. Some gardens bloom from sunlight, others bloom from sorrow. But both reach for heaven all the same. And somewhere, in the space between history and memory, a mother's voice still whispers through the petals. You took them for roses. Now my roses outlived you. If this story moved you, share it, subscribe, and light a candle tonight for every mother history tried to erase. Comment your state below. Let their names live again.